Once again, welcome to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I hope you guys had a great week. I know I did. Like I was saying to you last week, we moved back into our house. I don't think I shared with you that in January we had a huge fire at my house and had to completely renovate the second floor. And so we've been living from a hotel, renting houses from our insurance agent. If anything, I could tell you, make sure you get homeowners insurance or renters insurance. It really helped. But it's great to be back home. It's like we're in a new house completely. So we feel great. But there's a lot of boxes that we have to unpack. It's been an experience, a very humbling experience. Very blessed that no one was hurt through the fire. But last week we were talking about owning your identity and knowing with your mind and your heart who you are. I hope you guys got a lot of information about it. I got some great feedback, which is great. That always helps when getting feedback and understanding what you, the listeners, took out of the show. And if you ever miss a show, you can always go to BBM Global Network or my website, Attracting Your Life, and actually hear a previous broadcast. So tonight we're going to talk about the beautiful way of life called shamanism. So what is shamanism? I'm just going to give you like a dictionary version of it that from a book that was given to me by our guests, which I've learned a lot from. So shamanism is an ancient healing tradition and moreover a way of life. It's a way to connect with nature and all of creation. The word shaman originates from, and I'm going to mispronounce this. Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to even claim that. It's the way it originates from Tungus, a tribe in Siberia. Anthropologists coined this term and have used it to refer to the spiritual and ceremonial leaders among the indigenous cultures worldwide. The word shamanism can be used to describe the ancient spiritual practices of the indigenous cultures. Clearly, the countless similarities between various ancient traditions play a role in the continual generalization of the word. Over the past few decades, the term shamanism has been popularized throughout the Western world, especially with this new age circle that's going around. But today it can be difficult to distinguish between the traditional forms of shamanism and modern forms of shamanism. Often people say it's like an esoteric kind of spirituality, but it's really more of a way of life versus just a modality of spirituality. One can view shamanism as a universal spirit wisdom inherent to all indigenous tribes. As all ancient spiritual practices are rooted in nature, shamanism is the method by which we all human beings can be strengthened and connect with nature. So this is a beautiful practice and a way of life that I wanted to kind of share with you, the listeners. And I asked a very dear friend of mine, my shaman, a person who has taught me so much and who I go for healing, Jay. Welcome, Jay, to the show. Thank you for taking this opportunity to talk to all of us.
Hi, thank you. I feel honored to be asked to do this show.
So tell us real quick, well, not real quick, we can kind of pick it up after commercial, but if you can kind of tell me about a little bit of your journey and how did you get connected to this ancient tradition?
There was a time where actually I didn't even know what the word meant. Shamanism is not in my culture because I am Filipino, I'm from the Philippines, and we don't use that word. So there are many different words that describe the archetype, and in our culture, there's two words that we use: hilot, which means healer, and babaylan, which sometimes is defined as the holy person or person that is connected with specifically with spirits. And for me, the definition of shamanism archetype or a shaman archetype, and a wizard or a witch or different kinds of healer names, is that shamans are a bridge. They're a bridge between worlds, between this ordinary world and the spirit world, and the process of working and finding healing for their people is working with spirits. May that be through plants or prayers and different kinds of methods and modalities.
Once again, what is it called in the Philippine? Tilot?
Hilot, which means
hilot.
healer.
Oh, okay.
And
Definitely.
Babaylan.
Ababian.
And Babaylan is more towards, what most people would consider shamanism or shamans.
Okay. That's interesting. So like when we met, I've shared with my listeners and you know that I'm Haitian. I didn't know what, but we'll talk more about this, but I didn't know what I would kind of see in my visions when we would go through our journeys. And I had to discover
Mm-hmm.
what the Haitian tribe would call it and the Tatiano native Indians that were habitating Haiti prior to the slave trade. And so that was an interesting journey for me. And I think that book that you gave me, that really helped. And so we're going to talk more about this. I really wanted to kind of understand how you got connected to this in the first place. But we're going to go to commercial break. And when we come back,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm going too early. I apologize. But what we're going to be doing is I really want to kind of understand like why would a person even seek out a healer, and why would a person even feel as if they would need to be connected to a healer versus Western medicine and doctors? Because I find that very interesting. Can you kind of
Mm-hmm.
talk about that real quick?
Where would you like me to start? I
Okay,
guess
let's.
my introduction to this world.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would really credit my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
who introduced this view, this way of life. With really, it's my perspective of my reality. I grew up with her. My parents, when I was like really young, I think around a year and a half to 2 years old, worked abroad in Saudi Arabia. They were nurses, in the medical field. And my nana, my grandma, who took care of me growing up, was the one who took care of me as a kid and showed me different, like, her ways, and took me to different meetings with different people, who was always concerned about like the family and the life. And she was a healer, so people
Oh,
came
wow.
to her for help. She was an herbalist, and she knew Chinese medicine. And she was also the person who introduced me talking to spirit or force
Okay.
spirit.
Okay, wait, let's pick that up. Now I see the time that it is time for our commercial break, but I really want to learn more about what your grandmother taught you. Once again, you're listening to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Oh, please bear with me today. Like I said, we did move back into our home, and so there's a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to get over these bumps and bruises. But we get through that, we'll be back to smooth sailing. So before the commercial break, we were talking to Jay about shamanism, and he was telling us about his grandmother and how she kind of brought us into this. Can you kind of pick up the story where you left off? Because it was very interesting, Jay. I really didn't even know that about your
Oh yeah,
parents.
yeah. I owe a lot to my grandmother. In fact, that's my earliest memory of any parental unit is my grandmother. And she had also taken care of my mom. And this grandmother isn't really like related to me and to the family. Actually, I didn't know that until later on in my life.
Wow.
I always accepted her as blood, but she was a best friend of my mom's mother and my grandfather, and they were survivors of World War II. They hid in the jungle while there's Japanese and Americans. There was a big war.
Mm-hmm.
And she was also a religious woman too. I mean, she was a devout Catholic, but she had practices from the old world. She had practices from, as I mentioned, she knew about herbalism. She knew which
Mm-hmm.
plants were good, and that was local. And she knew a little bit about Chinese medicine. She did some moxie. I remember, doing fire cups. And she was also people may consider a soothsayer. So people go and ask certain things, aspect of their life and decisions that they need to make, and she would help them through divination. Tarot cards is a form of divination, and she was using like her own methods of doing it with water and candle. And I know she worked sometimes with like eggs with
Mm-hmm.
healing, and I know this is a practice in some South American cultures too. So she knew a lot of different things. And when I learned about what shamanism really was, when I met my first shaman, I guess that that knew that word, gave me a reading and stuff like that. He
Mm-hmm.
told me about my own path going to shamanism. And for a while I searched and looked for that, what that word meant, and I realized it is already here. It's already present. It has been in my roots. And since I moved to America, I was about 11. You know, these perspectives and these roots I had to ignore for a little bit or just hide for my own personal practice. Because, you know, going to school, here in America, just people, I didn't have anybody I can relate that to, and my parents tried really hard to assimilate us by speaking English at the home, and, you know, losing your language is also the same as losing a culture.
Correct.
So for a while, I didn't really connect that part of me until I was about to graduate college, and my sister had mentioned about a shaman, you know, doing a reading and stuff. And I even joked to her. I was like, "Ooh, you know, mystical stuff." And you know, I forgot about my own personal root. And after that, this person had connected me to my own roots, and remember my spirit guides, meaning, you know, my grandmother, and this connection started happening, and this practice for me had became curious to learn more about spiritualism and even just concepts of reality in many different cultures. And I read a little about Buddhism, a little about what the occult and paganism and what those words meant and which culture they come from. And really the word shaman really became a definition for myself when I met a group of shamans at Burning Man. This is a pretty big art event that happens in the desert, and over there is a certain part of that event that's dedicated to shamanism, and it's people from all over the world. Shamans just meet there, and they help, you know, they make themselves available and for people to come and see them. And I was introduced to a really good friend of mine whose name is Kat, is a psychologist and a practicing shaman who really bridged the world about the medical field and as well as the spiritual aspect. And she's well learned, and she knows many different people in this world that really showed me about who I am and how, like, where I fit in. Because growing up, it was almost impossible for me to fit in, you know, even amongst artists, because I'm an artist. Even among artists, I feel kind of different. But there is this world of shamanism that has specific qualities in each person that kind of like brings them all together.
Yes. I mean, everyone is unique. And when you do have a gift, a special gift of spirituality and being that bridge for people, you do find yourself set apart from others, and you can't fit with what is quote unquote norm, what is really norm, but what society views as norm. You kind of set apart. And I think that's why I was drawn to you so much. I mean, you know, you talked about divinity and tarot cards. I know with the Akashic, I was first introduced to the Akashic, and for me, every time I went into the Akashic records, I always kept on seeing or hearing that I need to speak to a shaman. And it wasn't until I think one time I told you, I was like, I think I had a dream about you. But I was like, when I met you, I was like, this is kind of weird. You look familiar to me. But it was the first time. So I really like how you said that your grandmother, she kind of touched on all aspects. I think that's something that I do see with indigenous cultures, or just that people kind of, it's an overlap. Like you said, your grandmother was a Catholic, but she had, you know, she still studied herbs, and she knew what kind of herbs could be used, and she kind of pulled and touched on all aspects. It doesn't have to be one set thing. Am I saying it right?
Absolutely. I think the archetype of that person, of provider of healing, you know, really is about the care for your tribe, the care for your family, the care and love for your fellow human beings. You know, and through that, there's many different avenues that, you know, of healing modalities and methods. But what really sets that archetype of shamanism is that spiritual connection. It's a different world and spiritual connection to another guide or healer from the other side as well that would help.
Okay. I really want to dive into that. When we come back, I want to talk about how does one become a shaman, so to speak. And so we're going to go on commercial. Once again, you're listening to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Once again, you're listening to Attracting Your Life Radio. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And before the break, we were talking about just how Jake got into this. But now I really want to understand, how does one become a shaman or get into this practice first place? Can you kind of answer that question, Jay?
Absolutely. There are many different methods, different ways, just depending on the culture. In some cultures, it is like you're chosen, or kind of like a prophecy kind of way, where like the past shamans kind of recognize that when the person's young, and most of the time this person is very sickly, and in the same sense experiencing both worlds, and the shaman could do a healing or helping this person process and get back to health, and it just changes their lives, and it's, and then they become some sort of apprentice or part of the way. And in some cultures they are like a family. You're born into it. Your family has been in this practice, in this trade, and the gift is passed down through lineage. Sometimes it's through test or through extreme experiences. And the shaman would put the person who's interested or wants to be in this path through extreme shifts of consciousness, so that they may enter this altered state too. So and a lot of it encompassing like the similarities. What a shaman really has to do is to master both this reality and the spirit reality, and be able to bridge, to come back and forth, because that's what the main function of what the shaman does for their group, for their culture, for their family.
Let's talk more about that, when you mean by mastering both realities. I know that was one thing that you helped me to do, because I found myself, whenever I would go into the airplanes are really loud around here. But one thing I found, like whenever I went into an altered state of consciousness, I felt so comfortable and peaceful there that it was difficult for me to come back. So could you talk about the different levels and different worlds, so to speak, that a shaman would enter?
Absolutely. I guess for most people that don't really have this experience, it's going to be difficult to really know word for word, like what do they mean by different worlds, right? It's similar to, let's say, a dream. You when you're dreaming, it's like you're there, you're present there, but like sometimes some people will wake up in their dreams like, wow, this is not a real world. This is not the reality. Well, and like the Toltec, for example, understand that the dream world is just another world. That is just as much as this one. So they practice a lot of mastering the dream world and this world, and mastering their own personal challenges. So it's similar and sometimes exactly the same, because, that is also another world that has to be mastered in some shamanism, if not most. But think about it as the concept of spirit world. Of a world where we can have access to spirit guides and or ancestors or higher self. And for most people, we have a common understanding of below and above. Above is where we look up to our ancestors, like Simba, for example, in Lion King. The master, the spirit of the leaders and those who are worthy go up into the skies and into the stars. They're looking up, thinking of angels, archangels, Buddhas, deities, and heaven, constantly upper world. And in this world, much like the Akashic records that I travel there, and we gain insight from the spirit of wise
our
beings
loved
who
ones,
have come before us.
Yes, correct.
And then there's the idea of this world, what people call the middle world, where a lot of our reality is in. There's the idea of the lower world, the spirit world, where the concept of spirit animals, spirit guides, spirit of past shamans can be accessed. And of course, there's the idea of the underworld, and in most cultures have this, where the dead goes. And sometimes this is also where our souls that we lost, and then we're going into a different concept of the basic belief of shamanism, which is spirit. Okay, so spirit having influence over us, like as in other spirits having influence in this world, as well as our spirit. Through trauma, we can lose part of that. And the idea of spirit, similar to will, let's say the spirit of this, or school spirit, or like group spirit, it's like that energy. So, and if we think about that as like part of our identity, whenever we experience trauma, and we see this in many different, mostly like children and kids who experience trauma will have a loss they change, they just horrific experiences. Like after that, we have to protect ourselves from being hurt again, and we lose a part of ourselves that just has that glimmer, that shine, that our life, we just get a little dimmer, because a part of ourselves. And so that part of our self that needs healing, after a while of creating this wall or putting away that part of us that doesn't want to get hurt, we grow up having these walls and character traits that we later on regret because it stops us from living, from connecting, from experiencing things because of that trauma. And that's really where the shamanic healing really comes from.
I like the concept. I know even for me, you helped me with going into my subconscious mind about dealing some trauma that I dealt with when I was a child. We're going to go on commercial break, and I kind of want to pick up about the spirit animals and where did this concept come from. You're listening to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay tuned. Hey, I'm your host, Maija, and you're listening to Attracting Your Life, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And before the commercial break, I had asked Jay that I want to really talk about these spirit animals. Where did this concept come from? The totems. I've seen totems and I'm like, is that what they're talking about? And I'm really asking this question for the listeners. I understand it, but if you can really explain spirit animals and spirit guides and that process.
Absolutely. This idea of embodying the wisdom and power of the spirit animals is really ancient and is pretty much present in, I want to be bold and say, if not all indigenous cultures, then definitely most, because it's a practice that's very common in the shamanic world. And the word shaman is just from one location. I'm talking about all the archetypes of shamans. Right. And it's the idea of really being connected to the world, the nature, and having respect and reverence for the different beings. I would say that the core of it is, think about as every being on this planet, birds, fish, deer, jaguars, lions, crocodile, us, humans, chimps, we all are different. And each of those living in this world is living and seeing the world in their perspective. The perspective of a fish and the way that they live is a lot different than the perspective of an eagle and how an eagle lives and how they see the world. And the practice of connecting to this animal spirit is really the main core also of shamanism, which is empathy. Empathy is to feel and relate. Not just to feel bad for the animals, but also to have this connection that I see, I understand how you view this world. And in a sense, gain wisdom and knowledge for me into my nature. That there's a lot more to what's going on than what I am normally seeing or normally being. And really, this in indigenous cultures, this is crucial to survival. This is how we find food. This is how we find medicine. And from that, having that reverence and having a connection, just like, even people with pets today can relate to this. Sometimes that they would have this connection to their animals and see how they are. And sometimes they even experience them in their dreams or meditation and sometimes, through medicine or psychedelic experience. Wow, my cat was there. How weird is that? Not really that weird. I bet you that happens all the time. And the idea of our animals and working with them in the spirit world is going to this place where it is described as the birthplace of spirit. Think about everything that is living here was an idea first,
Correct.
And so this is where that raw energy idea spirit comes from. And then when we go there, we experience in whatever shape or form that they may come to us as a spirit animal. In the case of that experience, it is the perspective that we need to see right now for ourselves, for whatever challenges is happening. That's what normally happens when I do my workshop or meeting your power animal, and just sharing this particular practice for people. It's different for every single person because people are going through a different challenge. But what is consistent, though, is that if I experience a wolf that is black, it doesn't mean that they're two separate wolves. they're the same because it's the core spirit, as in the representation, the meaning of what
Of
it
the
is to
wolf.
be wolf that we both are sharing. And so when people say spirit, I
Mm-hmm.
normally will define, what do you mean by that? Like, different people define that word. Like, language can sometimes be a barrier because my idea of this word that I'm saying may not be the same as what you had intended that idea to be. But in all sense of spirit, may it be ghost or
Mm-hmm.
ancestors or energy or even there are people who believe that every item has a spirit, not just living beings, but even a rock or my computer has a spirit of that. So there's a
Well,
lot of definition, but
that's
go ahead.
kind of what we've been talking about, like the power of oneness, with the universal law of oneness, that
Mm-hmm.
we're all connected
Mm-hmm.
and that we all have a sense of spirit in us. And I've been talking about that in the previous show. So like almost with an affirmation of I am that, and actually looking at that tree and knowing that you are that tree or that animal, that cat, that dog, knowing that you're connected and one with that. But I do like how you did say that different animals, if I understood you correctly, different animals will come to you at different times based on what you need at that time. Did I get that right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
that is the main objective, or the main, I guess, what happens when people go to a power animal journey or meeting the power animal.
Mm-hmm.
And after that initial experience, and each spirit has a different meaning, has a different medicine. The person who practices this and has a relationship becomes more in tune to the spirit world, and they start to have a relationship. So the practice of finding self-empowerment, but also when you're able to have access to these power animals and spirit animals, you can also journey for someone else. And when you can have that trust and connection to whatever information they give, it's a process too how shamans are able to gain some information and or healing and or medicine that may come from the spirit world for another person. And for other cultures, sometimes their sacrament or plant medicine is introduced this way, that the spirit had given it to them, and they were able to identify which plant would help save so that their people can live.
That is beautiful. So we're going to go on commercial break. When we come back, I kind of want to talk about how a modern person would kind of follow certain practices with shamanism. Once again, you're listening to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija, and once again, we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And before the break, we were just talking about shamanism, and what I really want to dive into is, Jay, could you tell us, like, what might a person do who practice shamanism? What would be their, like, daily practice?
In today's world, we have a lot of different connections now, and the world is smaller, and people are traveled and mixed. So
Mm-hmm.
unless, of course, you are living in your local indigenous land, there's different kinds of mixed practices. But I think what really is important that connects all of them is the connection to your spirit guides, your spirit helpers, and the spirit that you work with, and to be able to incorporate them in your healing practices and your daily life. So prayers, meditation, journeying to the spirit world, and even when you're working with different people or clients, and incorporating that practice into that. But really, prayer is really important. For me, a simple practice that one of my teachers had taught me is to do an offering for food. So when I'm eating, I'll just take my first bite, and I would offer that, and then pray and give gratitude to spirits, my ancestors, and to the spirits. Give blessings to those who are less than I do, and also pray for my family and friends. And it reminds me, every time I eat, it reminds me to pray. So for those who are just starting out, this might be a really good idea. Ancestors is also a really good connection to your great grandfather or grandfather or grandmother, people that passed away that is looking over you to like honor them. Other than that, it's good to always give gratitude and blessings to the nature of your ecology, like the nature of the land, the nature, the trees, the living beings, the animals there, and overall the whoever face of the divine that you are familiar with, whatever deity or angels or guides, and to honor them and respect them, and to seek out different ways of self-help, different ways of cleansing or just finding closer and closer connection. And this is for me to learn about different cultures, ways of shamanism, different ways of going into the spirit world or connecting with spirit.
And it's wonderful that it is free flowing and getting connected. I guess just connecting back to your roots and getting connected to spirit, because that's where the healing really is through the spirit, not really us. It's just us connecting. So one thing I do want to touch on is, and I love when you have these sessions. Can you talk about the sound healings sessions that you have?
In many cultures, the main tools for the shamans really are the drums and the rattles. And the drums are described to take you to the divine, your consciousness. So this is a good way to alter the consciousness and go to the spirit world or whatever different worlds that you're accessing to. The drums are a really good way to do that. And the drums can also alter your brain waves because of the rhythm and the beat. Shamanic drumming, for example, is on theta. And theta is a really, really dreamless state that when you're in, that's when your brainwave is operating in, and it's the same beat as the dun 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 drumming. Theta, continuous. Rattles are used for dispelling energies that no longer serves. So in many healing modalities in different cultures, there's some sort of a rattle or a shaker that's kind of either being used to create sound around the area to break apart the energy, or sometimes when that shaker's rattle is a leaf, sometimes it's used as a smudge, so you're just kind of like cleaning off the energy off the person. And for me, one of my passion is sound healing and vibrational therapy, and I actually do my own solar sound healing vibrational therapy certification classes, which I've done around here in Chicagoland area, and it's the teaching people how to use different kinds of instrument to facilitate a cleansing, tuning, healing for the person that's it's for. And each instrument has a way of connecting to us. Singing bowls, for example, are tuned to different notes and are really good for tuning the chakras. The energetic center, but that has many names in many different cultures. Also, even in South America, they can see chakras, when they're on their describing their ayahuasca experiences and healing, and the centers in the body that have connection to the different aspects of our lives, and they just happen to also have a specific vibrational tuning that they respond to. And in the sound healing world, it's sympathetic resonance, so that whatever tune that they're tuned to, when you strike a chord that is sympathetic, or as in like they're both in the same tuning, it helps tune the centers. There's also, I also work with a gong, which what I would describe to the participants as
I love the gong.
Thank you.
It's just like, it's just like everything that was on me, it just kind of shakes off when that gong and the vibration, it just goes through. It just goes through.
Yeah.
When we come back.
I would, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Real quick.
Oh, I would say that the gong facilitates an energetic flush, where we create a big vibrational wave in the room, and it just flushes out the whatever energy that no longer serves. And some people will experience this kind of like flushing through the entire system.
It's very felt. So we're going to go on commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to pick up on our little segment and we're going to talk more to Jay. Once again, I'm Maija and you're listening to Attracting Your Life Radio. And we're coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, to Attracting Your Life. I'm your host, Maija. And before the break, we were talking to Jay, and he was talking more about shamanism. But I wanted to share this poem that kind of came to me when I was getting prepared for this interview. And really, it's a tribute to how I met Jay and my relationship in getting to know about shamanism and my healing process. So if you don't mind, I would like to share it with you. I see your pain, you torturous soul. Your heart bends so cold. Is it me you seek to ease your pain, to answer your questions of your life? For they told you I was a medicine man, an oracle of some sort. I conjure healing as I visit different hidden worlds. It's to me you look to end your drought of joy and love. Your heart is barren, your land is dry. Your colors are dim, even blackened at times. Your conflict is real, your pain is seen. Your expansion has stopped, for your energy is drained, even blocked in spots where your colors are dim. My heart yearns to help and comfort you with gain. But first, come close. Let me whisper in your ear a secret of sort that all journeymen come to know as dear. It is not I that heal or perform the miracles that you hear and seek. It's the spirit guides that give the gift that I cherish to share. Let me go, let me go, let me go. I must first commune up in the mountains where my ancestors' tales are told. For they call me, do you hear? You hear the rhythm of the drums. Dum, 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 dum. I must go, I must go. The spirit guides of old, they call. Do you hear? They hear. They hear your cry. They see your pain. They want to heal you, my sweet, loving soul. Come if you can. Come with me if you will. If you feel the tug, if you feel the call, come. Listen to the call of the hawks and the flies in the air. Look up as they lead you to the upper world. Shk, 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 is the cry, and they will journey you to the underworld if you dare. So this is my tribute to Jay. I am so honored that he came. Jay, if people want to get in contact with you, how do they get in contact with you?
They can send me an email at simon@shamanjay.com, SIMON@SHAMANJAY.com.
I'm going to put that on my website, you guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. Learning more about shamanism. We'll definitely get Jay back on to the show so we can ask more questions. Today was just us just teaching you. But thank you again for listening. You were listening to Attracting Your Life. Remember, think, feel, and become the master of your universe. See you next week.